Welcome to the Evangelism Podcast. I'm Daniel King, and I'm excited about telling people about Jesus. Today I have a special guest, Matt Reed. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with me.
Thanks for having me.
So we are in the nation of Sierra Leone, and we have just finished a wonderful week of ministry here. And you have come at the invitation of Will Jones with Awakening Ministries International as a videographer to capture the story of what God did here in this nation with your video camera. And so you have a passion for telling stories with your video camera. Tell me, how did that start for you?
I think early on, it kind of came out of our ministry within the local church. So we have served in a number of capacities. My wife and I both do video. And so it's when I say we, it's usually myself and Jill. We, a few years ago, helped with the church plant. We were associate pastors and in charge of youth, but then they added on a little here and a little there and say, hey, can we do video announcements and start to tell, video testimonies, and they put a camera in my hand. And once they put the camera in my hand, for both of us, something sparked. You know what I mean? It was just, we were pretty excited about what we were doing and being creative with capturing stories, but also creating some fun content for video announcements. And that's kind of the spark as far as where it started, as far as using video in a ministry context. But we've always had a missions heart, my wife and I, for a number of years. We both went to school, grew up in church, and both had kind of a call to missions, but we knew it would be non-traditional. We never felt like, when people said, hey, what do you feel called to? We said, we feel called to missions. They say, where do you want to go? We just never felt like there's one place, so maybe a more non-traditional role, but we never really felt like we knew what that would look like until about 10 years into our ministry at this local church. It kind of hit us, like seeing missionaries come in and share what they're doing in their countries. Some of them were amazing with their presentations, and others would get up and they'd have PowerPoints that needed a little help, and it was just this intersection of like seeing the need to share stories of what God is doing all over the world and partnering with video. And that was kind of the spark of what we wanted to do. And so when we resigned from the church after about 5 years, from there I work at the district offices of the Assemblies of God in Minnesota on a part-time basis. And we kind of started a side hustle, which was our passion project was doing video, creating videos. And that's where 30 Story, the company, kind of came about. And from there, we've really partnered with a lot of nonprofits. And we've tried to be really intentional about partnering with missionaries, especially from Minnesota, and helping tell their stories and the stories of the churches on the ground, the people that they're ministering to over the last few years.
They say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and a video is 1,000 pictures, so it must be worth even more. Why is it important to tell the story about what God is doing using pictures and videos?
I feel like video just really captures an essence of reality that you even more so than just telling the story. I feel like the cool thing about video is that you can hear the sounds of what's around you, you know what I mean? And you can create wide shots to kind of see like what the environment looks like, or in a church, and you can see people at the altars. And at the core of it, I think people can really connect with that because they can see themselves in that video. In a sense, as we've traveled the world, there's obviously a lot of differences in cultures and the way that countries vary all over the world, but at the same time, the core of who we are, we're not that different. And I feel like when you put that on video and you see people and you're telling stories and you're seeing the emotion in people's faces, hearing how they are reacting to the gospel and seeing that, like, it's impactful. And you realize, like, I remember when I was there. I remember when I was at the altar, at youth camp, and when God called me. And I feel like there's a connection there, what you can see and hear and experience through video. That's just really powerful.
You've been around a lot of churches. You've seen a lot of missionaries and missions organizations. What would you say are some of the common mistakes that people make when it comes to communication?
That's a really good question.
And why is it important for people to invest in quality presentation of pictures and video and really communicating the story of what God is doing?
That's good. I'll go back to the original, the spark within the local church. We would see basically there's two types of presenters whenever they come in and present a project or whatever they were doing missionally. You'd see one where they would get up and probably they'd have a lack of stories. They would just be really heavy on statistics and just the demographics of the country, and all that stuff is good, but they might lack the stories. On the flip side, you'll have the other, another presenter who has a really a 90-second video that tells a story, and they get up and they share and for 30 seconds, set up the video, play the video, and at the end of the video, they just give an offering, and it's like response just is tenfold what the other person was. And that was kind of what we saw. We saw like all or nothing, you know what I mean? And I think the key is just telling stories. You got to really focus in on stories.
Yeah, everyone who listens to this podcast is an evangelist, missionary. They're excited about sharing the gospel. But in order to do that, you need to raise money, and you need to communicate with partners and friends and ask them to invest in what you're doing. Like in my ministry, we ask people to give at least $1 a month. Just if you can just give $1 a month, you can help us reach at least one person for Jesus with that dollar. And so we're always asking people and telling the stories of how does having pictures and videos help with the fundraising efforts?
Well, really, it paints a picture. It paints a picture of what you're doing, and especially even if it's at the very minimal, like you have a story. I'll use an example from this week. One of the guys that helped us with video, his name is Dulkash, and he's a Muslim. And at first I didn't know that. We're just talking about video, and we're both at the beginning of the week where we have a camera in our hands, each of us, and we're helping each other out and getting different angles and shooting all day and together. And as we began to talk, telling each other's background, found out he's a Muslim, and he's been working in churches. He's got a Christian friend, Tony G, who is there helping us too, and another pastor who's already speaking into his life, and just seeing that he has an openness. So it was just kind of cool to see that. And through that, throughout the course of the week, there's an opportunity then for him. He's experiencing everything of every service and every outreach, and he's hearing the gospel over and over again, and he's seeing people healed, and he's seeing people come to Christ. He's seeing a mom show up at these outreaches, and I remember, I think you were doing a healing service the one evening, and you asked for people to come forward, and he kind of was on the edge, kind of holding us back, and I just kind of walked up to him and I just said, hey, do you need prayer? Look, he's like, yeah, I have pain in my back. I was like, let's go forward and let's just pray. I'll pray with you. And so I prayed with him, and it's like nothing fancy, just Lord, I pray that you heal his back, and that was it. We walked away. I think that was Tuesday night, Wednesday night maybe, and I didn't find out until when was baptism? Was that on Saturday?
Yeah.
I didn't find out until he got baptized on Saturday. So it would have been Wednesday that we prayed for him. So he gave his life to Christ sometime in between then, Wednesday and Saturday, got baptized on Saturday, and then at our celebration service on Saturday afternoon, he shares a story of how, the groundwork that was laid through his friend Tony and his pastor MC, and just seeing everything that God was doing through him and in his life this week. And then he mentioned that, when I prayed for him, 15 minutes later, that God had taken away that pain that he had for 9 months in his back. And it was just one of the things that was just like, God is real.
So for him, it was a combination of being in our services, 5 or 6 services a day all week long, hearing the gospel presentation over and over again, and then going up for prayer, receiving a healing in his back. What a tremendous testimony. And then what a tremendous thing when he came to you and said, hey, I want to be baptized with the people who have given their lives to Christ. It's a huge victory.
Yeah, and I use that as an example of a story that I can tell without pictures. But even at the very least, I just took a selfie with him, right? just take a picture of me and Dolkash, and like, even if I can accent that story with an image and people can see his face and see his smile and look into his eyes and realize, oh, here's a guy who's impacted by Christ. At the very minimal, even just a picture of someone, I think can go, like you said, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And if I can accent with a story like that, of transformation of what God did in a week and in the life of Dolkash, that's awesome. And how much more that I had video all week of him. You know what I mean? Like, I have video of him getting baptized. I have video of him sharing his own testimony. I didn't expect him to share a testimony either. But how much more powerful is that story going forward, knowing that in his own words, I have captured on video what God did in his life.
And he's in almost every shot you made because he was there taking pictures.
Yeah.
You're probably trying to avoid
him.
To figure out a way to get a shot without the other cameraman in the shot.
But I say that because, like you said, the story's powerful in and of itself.
Yeah.
But if I add an image, how much more powerful? And then if I add video, wow, and even in his own words, like, it's just layer upon layer that can add depth to the story.
Yeah, I think sometimes evangelists get really enamored with pictures of big crowds and numbers.
Yeah.
It's saying we had X number of people saved, and there's competition, like, we got this number of people saved, how many did your crusade get people saved?
Yeah.
But often I think that only evangelists really connect with the picture of the big crowd. Other people really connect with the story of the individual whose life was changed. And so, like on our website, we always put the picture of the big crowd, but I always try to find that story 1 in a million, because we're trying to reach 1 million people for Jesus every year. But I really want to highlight that 1 in a million. And when you're talking about numbers, it's important to remember that every number represents an individual whose life was changed. And through story, you can highlight some of those stories of what Jesus has done in individuals' lives.
Yeah, in a way, it's just to piggyback on that. I run social media for our Assemblies of God in Minnesota and a couple of other nonprofits. And what we find on social media is that the greatest engagement is usually when it's a picture of an individual or maybe 2 people. If you post a crowd picture, engagement drops. If you're posting a promotion, engagement drops. But the moment you show like a child or, in your church, or a volunteer in your church active in ministry, your engagement goes up. And that's what people connect with, because it's harder for people, everyday people, to connect with a crowd or to connect with even a worship team or a group of people. But when you can show them, create a connection with one person, that's something that really resonates.
So you have a business, and with your business you help nonprofits to tell their stories. If someone wants more information about you or wants to connect with you, what's your website? What's a good way for them to connect?
Yeah, they can connect with us at 30story.com, and that's all spelled out, 30story.com. And just reach out. Our email's on there, contact form. We'd love to connect.
Well, thank you so much for being on the Evangelism Podcast. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Daniel King is on a mission to save 1 million souls a year, but he can't do it alone. Would you consider sowing a financial seed today? To give, please visit www.kingministries.com.